Watch Bad Films, the podcast where we watch bad films so you don't have to. I'm Gary, and joining me this week is Jay.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Jay, and how are you today?
I'm splendid and tremendous. How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. I've had some time off. I'm feeling energized. I'm going to bring myself way down by watching a rubbish film.
Yeah, you sound way too excited. That is not the correct headspace, I'm afraid.
Oh, not the great headspace. Well,
Yeah.
to get us in the right headspace, I had a question for you, something I've been thinking about. And we watch quite a lot of films, and I think we both have directors that we're fans of. But I wondered, even the best directors have the odd turkey, have the odd absolute piece of rubbish on their CV. And I wondered, Jay, if you had any suggestions for a good director, bad movie.
Oh, yeah, I've got quite a few actually. I don't delineate between films, music, books, art. These film directors, they're meant to be, they're creative artists, aren't they? Really, if you want to go down that.
Well, apart from Michael Bay, yeah.
Yes. I don't know where I remember reading this, but I read this somewhere. I may have even spoken to you about this a while ago, but I remember reading a quote that said Paul McCartney and Ridley Scott are obviously both geniuses or extremely good at what they both do, but also, and they've done some of the best artwork in their own fields that have ever been created. So
Yeah, and before we talk about Ridley Scott, we should both point out we're both big fans of Paul McCartney. So where are you going with this? What's your evidence in the Paul McCartney locker?
Well, I mean, Paul McCartney is a musical genius. It's undeniable. He's a songwriting genius. He can play. He has music coursing through his veins, and he's created some of the best music that's ever been created, either with the Beatles or without them. But also, he's produced albums and albums of absolute guff.
And would you name at least one of those albums?
No, I'm not going to name names, but I would suggest to you that Paul McCartney's a bit like he is so used to being all powerful in his field that no one ever really tells him no. So he just basically writes and records whatever comes to him, and he kind of thinks that they're all as good as each other, which is not the case. He's a bad editor. He's bad at editing himself. I would say Ridley Scott.
Now this is a topic that we've come across a lot: bad editing.
Yeah.
And I don't know which directors you're going to say, so I don't want to preempt anything. But we've definitely come across directors we like that have got poor editing choices or not enough tight rein on them.
Yeah.
But go on, you're going to talk about Ridley Scott.
And I mean editing, not just the technical term of cutting up film and stuff. I mean literally being able to stop parts of your creativity coming out so that it just doesn't become a bloated mess.
I believe the phrase that often comes up is "slaughter your darlings," isn't it?
Kind of thing.
Something I'm absolutely obsessed with, but it doesn't actually service the overall goal of your project. And in the context of a film, the story, does it further the story?
So I would say Paul McCartney's got this problem. Ridley Scott has got this problem. Now, Ridley Scott is actually one of my favorite directors.
So what are the films they are the go-tos for Ridley Scott? What's his best work?
The first 4 or 5 films are amazing. So he starts with The Duelists. I don't know if you've seen it. Brilliant.
I've not seen The Duelists.
Brilliant. It's Napoleonic.
That doesn't belong on this podcast.
No, it doesn't. Napoleonic era, 2 guys who have this tiny little spat, and one of them takes it too far, and then they have this duel which is not resolved, and because of the the vibe at the time, where it's all about honor, and because this initial duel is not resolved, they keep bumping into each other during the Napoleonic Wars and keep trying to finish this duel, and it never happens, and it escalates. But it's beautiful, it's well acted, it's well written, it's atmospheric, it's a great film, particularly as a starting film. Then he went from that to Alien, which is one of the best sci-fi horror. I mean, it's kind of its own genre, but it's basically the best of that type of film ever made.
It's a haunted house film,
It is a
essentially,
haunted house film.
on a brilliant setting. I love Alien. I can watch it, all
Well,
day long. I watch it at least once a year. Um, and it doesn't stop being interesting, entertaining, good performances, amazing production design, great editing. Back to that thing again, and beautifully underplayed performances as
yeah.
well.
And all of the other subsequent Alien films, whether you like them or not, are all directed by supremo directors, and they all always say that they go back to the original as being the thing that they're trying to achieve, the thing that they're trying to beat. It's held up as being one of the best films of all time, really, Alien, particularly in that genre.
Yeah,
And then
it's
he goes,
it's in the top 10 for me, certainly. So what's on the other side for Ridley Scott? What's he done that's really
well,
bad?
I mean, so my point is, he does that, and then he does Blade Runner, then he does Legend, which I think is a great film. People don't really like it, but I think it's a great, sumptuous-looking film. So he does quite an amazing run of films, and then he does absolute tripe, in quite a close run, quite near in time to those previous films. So I have an interest in Ridley Scott, so I'm trying to watch or collect all of his films. And he's done some great films, but he's done terrible films like Someone to Watch Over Me.
Mm.
Yes, so you don't know what it is, do you? You've never heard of that film. It's what he did straight after, I think he did after Legend. So he was desperate to do something set in the real world because all of his previous films have been historical, fantasy, or sci-fi. And it is so boring. It is boring. The characters, I mean, the acting's pretty bad. The characters are terrible. It's really badly written, but you're the director. It's your name, and I've got loads of the DVD stuff, so I've seen loads of Ridley Scott interviews where he's talking about it's my name on, over this film. I'm the one who takes the fall if it goes wrong. I'm the one who gets all the props if it goes right. But it's my responsibility.
Mm.
So in which case, why did you make that terrible film? And then, and then the unforgivable two recent Alien prequel reboots, side films, whatever they want to call them. I'm talking about Prometheus and Alien Covenant. Are just
Mm.
boring, middle of the road, rubbish films. Certainly in comparison to Alien. And in loads of interviews, he says the thing that worked about Alien is that it's the tension, it's the realistic dialogue. I had the actors just talking to each other, realistic characterization, realism, and you barely see the alien, and it's all about threat and stuff. And then he makes Alien Covenant and Prometheus, where you see the alien all the time. It's really violent. In both films, the characterization is minimal and the dialogue is unrealistic, clunky, and drama esque. And I just think, have you not listened to your own commentaries, Ridley? Surely you should be talking to yourself, and you should have realized that what you've done here is you've taken your legacy and peed on it from a great height. So that's what I'm putting forward as a great director who's done terrible films.
Well, I can't argue with that. Can't argue with that. I sometimes stick up for Prometheus because I think there's something enjoyable in it. I don't think it's particularly well told, but I do think there's something in it. I really like the art direction in it. I like the cold whites and blues. I think that's really interesting. I think the performances are generally poor. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, but it's hard to completely stand
Yes,
up
but
for
what
it.
we're talking about here, Gary,
Uh,
is we're talking about
but
directors, and he's a very successful director, so he can kind of do whatever he likes. And from his own mouth, the buck stops with him. So if the acting's no good or the story is incoherent, he has to make it coherent. That is his job, and I have no sympathy. So what my point is really is that I don't understand how it happens. I don't understand.
no, quite. Well, I'm gonna pick a director for me who is generally pretty good, great even. Um, but in my opinion, did a particularly bad film, and maybe even more, depending on your point of view. So I really like that you said Ridley Scott and Alien, because I now want to turn to the director of Aliens, which is James Cameron. So, let's go back. Terminator 1, a great taut chase thriller. Terminator 2, a comic book adventure. Aliens, which is an out-and-out war film. I really like True Lies, which is a silly Arnold Schwarzenegger spy film. Let's not forget, we discussed a little bit of James Cameron back on episode 10 when we talked about Battle Beyond the Stars in his first art director role. Really good eye, really good conceptualizer, making a word up there. He can really bring a world to life, much like Ridley Scott can when he's on it.
Much like George Lucas.
But I'm picking out, much like George Lucas, we need a whole other podcast to talk about George Lucas because that man's particular to us. So let's avoid that iceberg. But I'm not going to go for that film. I want to put up Avatar, which I absolutely hate.
Yeah.
It is miserably overwrought and overlong. It's so preachy. It's so boring. I hate that man of that moment, Sam Worthington. He's like on a computer game when you get to design your own character and you don't select anything, you just say default. You even leave the name as default, Joe Default, and he's just nothing. He's a complete and blank canvas of a person on which nothing is painted.
Yeah. I'm so desperate to agree with you. He was that man of that moment, and he's disappeared now, and we know why. Because
I'm sure he's doing great work on Japanese beer commercials or music videos or whatever the hell he's doing.
Helped to ruin the other Cameron franchise. That was Terminator Salivation, or whatever it was.
Yes, one of those Terminators. I lose track because they decided let's not number the Terminators anymore, so nobody thinks they're missing one. I can't keep track of them. There's one called Salvation. There's one called Genesis. There's one called
Rise
Dark
of the
Fate.
Washing Machines.
There's one called CSI New York. I don't know. Revenge of the Sith or something. There's too many Terminators now. But getting back to Avatar, we couldn't even stay on Avatar because it's so boring. We had to move off and talk about other films. I resent that it was the most financially successful film for nearly 10 years. I hate that fact that we're saying, yep, this is the one that all of us wanted to spend our money on for such a long time. Yeah. And I was, I've mentioned before, I am not a fan of the comic book film genre, but I was pleased to see it push Avatar off the perch because I was sick of it being there.
Yeah.
It's just boring. And I hate the fact that there's 55 sequels coming that he's apparently written and directed.
A bit like Ridley Scott and the Alien franchise. I've heard and seen interviews with him where he says, I could spin this out for the next 10, 20 years. I could just, keep going. I'm like, why would you do that, Ridley? Why would you want to do that? And it's the same with James Cameron. It's like you've made this bog standard special effects film, which is basically Dances with Wolves in space or wherever it is. It's not even an original idea. Mm-hmm. And then you want...
Or Pocahontas,
and then you want to spend 20 years creating this whole world and have about 20 sequels. I mean, why? Why would anyone... You're meant to be a filmmaker. So this is the crux of the matter is when a good director just makes a terrible film or hugely terrible decisions, and you just think, why? How is this possible? How can you be so good and yet so bad at the same time?
This is a subject we could go on and on about. And let's perhaps pick it up on a future episode. But perhaps, hey, you out there, if you've got a director that you think is generally pretty good and he just, or I say he or she, directed an absolute stinker, please get in touch and let us know. Find us on Twitter, We Watch Bad Films, on Instagram, We Watch Bad Films, or email us, wewatchbadfilms@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we can discuss them on a future episode. We need to do that thing we do, which is to watch a bad film. And what will you suggest to us today,
Well,
Joe?
it's not actually me suggesting it, really. We had some suggestions for our Halloween episode, and
we did.
You went off-piste and chose Alone in the Dark, which was deeply unfulfilling on all levels.
Hey, after that, I went to IMDb and put 1-star review for that, and there's not many films I've got a 1-star review for. That's actually something we should do on a future episode. Films I've rated 1 stars on IMDb. I've been rating films on IMDb for a long, long time, and there's not that many deserve a 1-star. Spoilers: Avatar is one of them, but yeah. So what have you decided?
Well, we had a few suggestions online, I think on Twitter, and one of them was from an old colleague cohort of yours, Richard Sandling.
Richard Sandling, yes, Rich Sandling's Perfect Movie. Find him at squat_Betty on
Now,
Twitter.
I just went off on my own volition, and I think I found the film that is after. It's certainly a film that is on my huge list, and it is called Rock and Roll Nightmare.
Oh, interesting.
So 1987.
1987.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of it when he mentioned it last week, and I did a very, very brief amount of research just to talk about it. Have you got any facts to lead us into it?
Yeah, I don't have many facts, but I have seen clips of it, so I'm not going into this completely cold. And when he mentioned it, I was aware of it, so I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it is hilarious by all accounts.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we should watch it. We'll go off and watch it. You guys listen to the trailer for it, and we'll see you on the other side.
Here's your new home for the next 5 weeks.
Back to nature, huh? No hot tubs, no dynasty.
Hey, no one's lived here for 10 years?
Relax. Would I pick a loser?
What are we supposed to do here?
Rehearse, lame brain.
Prepare to die.
I knew if I pissed you off long enough, you'd make a personal appearance.
Let's tune our weapons.
We've just watched Rock and Roll Nightmare, also known as The Edge of Hell. And before we discuss, Jay, I'd like your initial off the cuff reaction.
Insane.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Let me paint a picture for some people. So we have a cold open on a farm. The mum, or Aggie Philbin, as she looks like, is busy making dinner. Dad is off somewhere, son is upstairs. Suddenly mum is dragged into the oven and replaced by a skull on a stick. Apparently she's dead. We then have a long scene of a band arriving at a farmhouse to rehearse. This is like a Rockfield Farm kind of deal. They've come here to sort of capture some energy. So this very 80s Black Sabbathy Aussie hair metal type band rehearse for a while. They are led by John Triton, played by John Micklethor. More on him later. Whilst they are rehearsing, a sort of sock puppet penis appears with an eyeball. It does something into a cup, and this appears to infect the band. Infect one of the band members. There then follows some interchangeable scenes where different members of the band have sex. Strictly hetero, of course. and they have sex for a long time. There's lots of footage of that, and then one of them will turn into a monster and eat the other one. And when I say turn into a monster, we cut away, we cut back, and they've got some makeup on. Mostly it's a sort of like bit of glue on the face and a rubber hand they got from Poundland. Some groupies arrive, and their manager Phil is now turned into a monster, does away with them apparently, but we never learn of their fate. This pattern continues. So this film is an hour and 23 minutes long. This happens for the first hour. Then in the final 20 minutes, all of a sudden, the original kid that was in the opening scene appears. Again, he turns into a monster and gets a couple of people. We don't really learn what happens to him. And then finally, our hero, John Triton, is confronted by someone who was with him who turns into Satan himself. And John Triton becomes the intercessor, Archangel Triton, now with extra eyeliner. There is a long fight, and he defeats Satan. The end.
Very succinct. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, well, one thing we will say about it is there ain't a lot of plot in it.
Yeah, you may challenge me on this. I would say there's almost no plot for the vast majority of the film.
Yeah, and I think, well, it's kind of interesting and amusing that we brought up Alien in the intro to this podcast, because there's something of an Alien vibe to the first 4/5 of the film, in terms of there is something stalking the other people in the film. I'm not comparing the two. Can I be clear? But there's definitely an air of sort of spooky house. Gradually take out everyone's 80s slasher film type thing. And in fact, if you dial back to our last episode 12, you'll hear me talking about the Friday the 13th films, and particularly quite a few of them have a very boring, ponderous start before they get into frankly, the interesting bit where people start getting offed. And it's a bit the same here. It starts very plodding with some of the longest shots you'll see on celluloid.
And there's a lot of people start getting off with each other.
Yes, there's a lot of that. I mean, titillation is fine, but when it's just people mashing their faces against each other, it's just a bit. Yeah.
I think I just want it to be clear to the listeners that this film is completely and utterly nuts.
It's quite deranged.
Your very succinct plot summary, this film is crazy. It is meaningless. The band arrive at a house and they do nothing but wash up in the sink, shag, and play awful rock music for over an hour. That is the whole film.
Let's break some of that down. So if you're a fan of washing up, this is the one for you.
Yeah, sponsored by Fairy Liquid, this film. The edge of the plate, as is what it should be called, as you're washing it up.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of washing up. A lot. And so, if you get off on that, this is the one for you.
Yeah, they're the most boring rock band I've ever come across. They wash up. They have little dinners with plates, 5 little plates around a little table. They'll wear loads of knitwear. In fact, I think one of them was knitting, weren't they? Someone was knitting.
Yep, during one of the rehearsals, one of the rocking out tunes,
Someone was knitting.
One of them was knitting.
Yeah.
And I've never toured with a band, Jay. I know you have, and so I don't know if that's something that goes on, a lot of knitting.
Yeah, it was the crochet tour of 1995, if you remember.
No.
Yeah, we did it. A lot of scarves were knitted on that tour. Yeah, it's absolute tripe. None of the film makes sense. It was shot after shot of boring conversations that I couldn't
That you
hear
couldn't hear.
because of either the awful songs, the awful rock songs, which I think the main actor had some hand in, or
He did.
the off the wall, off kilter, almost unlistenable score. Now, can you remember any of the score at all, Gary?
Well, there's lots to the soundtrack / score to really pull apart, and so let's start on the score. The score was, hey, isn't Tubular Bells a good tune for scary films? Yeah, let's have lots of that. Let's have lots of not quite copyright infringing Tubular Bells knockoff.
Yeah.
And done with only one finger as well. And then you get the soundtrack. As we've said, it's very 80s hair metal. You already know what it's like. Plenty of chorus repeated over and over again. And that's fine. It's doing its thing. You're without me even describing it, you know what it sounds like. But what I've never heard in a film before, and I think they should be applauded for, is simultaneously playing score and soundtrack at the same time.
Yeah, there was at least 2 scenes where there was a song playing, an awful rock song, and then the deranged synthesized score playing something completely different key, different feel, and it was a brain mashup. Avant-garde.
Yeah, I mean, it messed with my mind, definitely.
What about the that sort of bizarre seal falling down a cliff sort of sound effect that they had on that synthesizer?
Yeah, I think they found one setting on their Moog and you just went for it over and over again.
For about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's a film. I don't want to say 2 halves because the split isn't even fair, but quite a lot of it you were cursing Richard, who brought this film to our attention. And yet, I enjoyed it quite a bit more than some of the absolute crap we've watched.
Yeah, I mean, you said it was entertaining. Yeah, it was entertaining. I mean, it was on the edge for me. It was on the edge of like, oh my God, some plot better appear at some point, or I'm going to.
Well, the final act, redeems it, I think.
It does. But can I just say, before we get talking about the final act, which those last 20 minutes make this film, before we do that, please, can I just touch upon the how do I put this? The sort of assault course of the preceding 10 minutes, which were just a shagfest. Can we touch on that, please? Because in order to get to that last 20 minutes, the finale, which makes the film, you have to sit through between 5 and 10 minutes of every single person in that house shagging over and over again, and it doesn't cut away. It just on and on. So once that happens for a while, it's 2 characters, and I was like, Gary, this has to stop. I can't watch this anymore. And then finally it stops, and then it cuts to the other characters. Oh, and they're going to start shagging. And it's just endless tits, arse, sweaty bits, flapping lips, just, oh my God. And the camera was right in there. It was horrific. So I'm afraid that almost made me want to throw my laptop out the window, because I almost couldn't cope with it. So it was a good job the ending came when it did, because I was on the edge.
Yeah,
The
that's
edge of
quite
hell.
fair. Like I said, the edge of hell. You see, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. Let's look at the main guy himself, John Mickle Thor. So this was not a guy with which I was familiar, but he wrote, produced, and was the main star in this film. His Wikipedia entry lists him as bodybuilding champion, actor, songwriter, screenwriter, historian, vocalist, and musician. I like the distinction vocalist and musician. You need one more credit in there. He's not unimpressive at his different Renaissance man activities he's taken part in. He achieved over 40 bodybuilding titles. He's the first man to get Mr. Canada and Mr. USA. So he's not without merit, you know. And we do know that he's a bodybuilder because he spends quite a bit of the end completely nude, apart from a studded codpiece.
I'm not questioning his muscular prowess. I'm sure he's done all of those things. It's just everything else that he's doing is rubbish. He can't act. He's written one of the worst films I've ever seen, and his music is absolutely awful.
Yeah, so he's quite an interesting guy to himself. I completely missed off a key plot point, actually, that's just come back to me. When he confronts Satan at the end, he's happy about it. And you think, why is he not reacting to this spindly demon
so
appearing?
bizarre.
Oh, it's because every person in that building was a figment of his own imagination, and he used them to conjure forth the devil himself so he could be vanquished. Obvious, you know, signposted from the beginning.
But you're women, the others, your band, your groupies. What of them?
Never here, Bub. Merely shadows I created to entertain your little friends. Juicy little souls to bring you out into the open.
Yet again, explaining the plot makes it sound like it sort of made sense whilst we were watching. When that happened, we were like, what is going on? What the hell's happening? Why is he turned into that woman who sings Turn Around Bright Eyes? Why is his hair exploded? Why is he wearing a metal thong? Why is he talking to that flapping plastic toy, which is meant to be the devil, like he's just the milkman? I don't understand. And then later on, we worked out, oh, he's done it all himself. It's like he's done it on purpose. That was not clear.
It's a Starmobile.
It was not clear.
So you've just brought up there some of the monster effects. They're quite entertaining. They are worth the price of admission. Not in a good way, I have to be honest, but they are quite funny. There's one that is a cross between a sock puppet, a penis, and
a potato.
Just an eyeball, and it's very odd.
They look like potato penises to me.
There's another one that looks like, you know, when you film someone's head upside down, so you just see their chin and their mouth moving. It looks like that.
Oh, do you mean that? I think that was meant to be a plastic chicken in a fridge, and then it started talking. It started talking because Thor reaches in to get a heavily obvious sponsored Coca-Cola can from the fridge.
Coca-Cola classic.
On the plate next to him as he's reaching in is this lump of plastic, which I think is meant to look like a chicken, and then the chicken starts opening its mouth. And I think that's what that was. I think it looked like an upside down head with an eyeball on its chin.
I'll pick out some lines that I wrote down, some delicious bon mots that fell from the mouths of our intrepid heroes. There's one guy, and I think he's doing a Cockney accent.
The accent.
He actually comes off as one of the goblins, one of the orcs from the Lord of the Rings films. He's called Stig. That's nice, isn't it? And he says, and he, of course, he just has sex. He takes his glasses off and says,
"I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go shake the monkey, eh?"
Yeah, with awful accent as well. Yeah. Oh,
It's very
look, man,
charming.
I'm gonna shake a
ag-
monkey.
And that's probably a bit of running slang I don't understand because I'm above all that. On a similar note, Phil, the manager, says to his gang of roadies, you called groupies, sorry, you called them the sensational Sherry Squad because they all have that, that particular look. Nice reference for the teenagers there. He says, sex and drugs really knock you out.
Just nonsense. Utter nonsense.
And when our hero Triton has defeated the beast, he says,
I'll see you again, old Scratch.
Yeah, that's the final. That's the
Old
final line of the
Scratch.
film. I'll see you again, old Scratch. What? Okay, great.
But not without directorial flair, because there were two instances of I don't know the technical name for it, but I know it as the Hitchcock zoom, where you dolly forward and zoom out, or zoom in and dolly back. I can't remember which way around it goes, but essentially that. But they did that twice. It was nice. Clearly they thought it was cool. Yes, they definitely had a crane. Lots of shots from sort of 3/4 above their heads that don't really tell you a lot, but clearly thought, well, this is fun. Also, lots of shots from down the ground.
Particularly when Thor is half naked and he's fighting the bit of plastic known as the devil. So many cool shots.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen my body? Yeah, way too much. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I was just browsing this on IMDb and I came across a review that gives the film 10 out of 10, so that's interesting, from user Jesse Ravenwolf. Now, let me just read a little quote from it. He says, I'm Jesse D'Angelo, the actor who played the young boy in this magnum opus. I acted in several low-budget horror films in the 80s, and this is my favourite. First of all, this movie was shot in 7 days with a budget of only $50,000.
What? Wow.
And he says, okay, you make a better movie with that much time and money. No problem. I'll take that challenge.
Yeah, I'll do that now. I'll write it on the back of my bit of paper I've got in front of me. Okay. That's really not a defense for this film. Carry on.
For the money we had, we couldn't afford anyone who knew what they were doing. This was basically a glorified student film. It wasn't glorified. It was a student film. When I was watching it, I thought, this is like a student film, but not as good. It was made for no money by a bunch of amateurs working their asses off.
It certainly looked like it was made for no money.
And then to justify it, he's put, many people from that movie have gone on to prosperous careers. John Fasano, he was the director and he did the puppet work, has continued to work as a writer, producer and director on Another 48 Hours, Alien 3, Tombstone, and he goes on to list some other stuff, including himself. And so fair play to them and fair play to him.
Whoa, Alien 3?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That still doesn't justify it. I would refer to my previous episode where I say, if you don't have the budget or the know-how and the ability to do something, then you shouldn't do it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think there's definitely passion in it, and I don't mean that.
No,
sexy
there's no
stuff that
passion
went on
there.
forever and ever. I just mean that there was definitely people enjoying what they were doing and getting on with it. The fact that the result was really poor is just one of those things, but I think they were trying to enjoy it and trying to make a good film. I mean, they put everything into those song productions.
It's a bit like when your child, like, in play school, scribbles some awful doodle and says, look, I've drawn a picture of you and mummy, and you look at it and it's just like a big brown splat on a piece of paper, and you go, well, 10 out of 10 for effort. I'll give it that. But it's still a brown splat.
Yes, splat indeed. I've just come across a great descriptor of it, which is again from IMDb user year 2889, who says it's the Muppet Show meets Spinal Tap meets Friday the 13th meets Total Crap.
Brilliant. Those are the four sides. Yes, four sides of this house.
And that completely nails it. Completely nails it.
I wanted to say that it started off as like some sort of scary, brooding horror film, but when I suppose they're demons, right? When they appeared, they were like weird, jokey characters, and so I was confused by the tone of it. But I'll go one further. I would just like to ask you, Gary, what does it all mean? I didn't quite understand why was the devil there? What were the little potato eyeball things? How did they infect people, and why were they doing it? And what happened to the family at the beginning? That's what I want to ask. Do you have an answer for any of those things? I was confused.
Not really, because everything's undone by the final showdown where Triton says he caused all of them to appear to tempt the demons out, and he says, "Oh, something like all of your demons are
mumbo jumbo." Okay,
just
I was
nothing
confused.
to me.
I thought maybe I'd lost
Is a
myself and forgotten something, but no, it was just tripe. Okay, that's fine. That's all I wanted to ask.
Yeah, and not to get too theological about it, but I don't think Satan's in the business of just popping up and murdering people in a farmhouse anyway. I thought he was all about temptation and stuff like that.
Yeah, and sort of, why would he choose a random farmhouse in the middle of nowhere in Canada?
Well, that would be an ecumenical matter. So, Jay, would you recommend Rock and Roll Nightmare /
Well,
The
it was
Edge of
recommended to us, so someone thought it was worth recommending. I would hesitantly recommend it because, my God, it really asks a lot of you. It really does. But I think the last 20 minutes just about saves it. Just about.
I think you're right. It's boring getting there, despite gratuitous
really
sex
gratuitous.
and rock and roll. And then you have this finale, which just comes out of left field and is so ostentatious as to be.
I distinctly, I mean, I lost it, but I always lose it. But I distinctly remember hearing you laughing your ass off. I mean, it was literally out of nowhere. It was completely and utterly nuts. So I suppose I would recommend it just for that.
Yeah, I mean, you know how in From Dusk Till Dawn, spoilers, halfway through the film, it just suddenly does a huge right turn in the road, and you are watching a different film all of a sudden. Well, that's not quite like this, but it's that jarring
It's like
a change.
A really shoddy.
Indeed. Well, that's what we thought of Rock and Roll Nightmare. If you've seen Rock and Roll Nightmare, and I'd love to know your thoughts. Again, get in touch with us on Twitter at We Watch Bad Films or Instagram We Watch Bad Films. If you're enjoying the podcast, I do hope you are. Please make sure you subscribe on your podcast app of choice. If you could leave a review, that'd be even better. We'd really appreciate it. Meanwhile, we'll catch you next time for another bad film. Thanks, Jay.